Kayla from Kayla Ray Vinyls, and today I'm going to talk to you about why I am destashing all of my nail polish. I have 800 bottles of nail polish and then another 100 plus bottles of gel polish. This is way more polish than any person needs, and I'm actually reaching that point where I'm just completely overwhelmed by it. How I got to this point is a little more complicated than that. I've been collecting nail polish since about 2006 is when I really started, hunting for the coolest colors and having that special polish and making sure my nails were always perfect. And it was, not terrible for, a couple of years. Nail polish would dry up and I'd get rid of it, and I wouldn't buy too many similar colors. I'd want to have unique colors. And then in about 2010 it started to explode. I had a lot of stuff happening in my personal life in 2010. My grandfather got sick and died very quickly. From the time he was diagnosed to when he passed was 6 weeks. It was so quick, in fact, that I didn't even get a chance to go and see him and say goodbye. So that sort of sent me into this spiral of wanting to control something, have something that made me happy. And that's what nail polish became, was something I could go and do for myself that made me happy. And I continued doing that. Slowly at first it started to build from 2010. I went away to school that September, in September 2010, and started work on my post-grad in museum management. That was a very stressful year. The program I did is kind of like condensing 3 years of work and practicum into 1 calendar year. So it's a lot of work. There's not a lot of downtime. There's a lot of pressure to succeed. It's highly competitive. It was exactly what I needed at that point in my life, because I didn't have time to stop and dwell on all the things that had happened, had changed in my life. My sister had left the family home as well. So, that was some adjusting for me. Our animals, our cats, who we had had for 15, 16 years, had passed away that year. That was another adjustment. It seems kind of silly, but it's a lot of things where it just sort of builds up and builds up. And for someone who doesn't already like change, makes it that much worse. So when I had finished my program in fall of 2011, I moved back home, and I didn't find a job right away. My program is very specific. They train you for a very specific field, and that field is heritage. And at the time, there was not a lot of heritage jobs available. We were 3 years after a recession, and a lot of the funding that goes towards culture institutions is among the first on the chopping block and the last to get reinstated when the economy starts to improve. So I had to go back to a job I was doing when I was in university. I was working as a receptionist, and then I went and started working retail, which was really bad for me as someone who already had anxiety issues. So I started buying nail polish as a way to compensate. It became something that made me happy. I could go to the beauty supply and see what was on sale, what was new, what didn't I have, and start buying. And my collection really started to explode that year. I went from about 60 bottles to almost 200 in the span of about 6 months. Fortunately, it wasn't a long period of adjustment. I did find a job within my field about 6 months after I finished my final practicum, my internship. But that meant more income and new stress and more problems. So I kept buying nail polish. Other girls are spending their money on shoes and dancing and drinking and all of that stuff, and I thought it was okay. I was spending my money on nail polish. And, I was there for a couple of years, still had income, still bought more and more nail polish. And it got to a point where my collection swelled up to about 500 bottles of polish. So I was like, okay, this is fine. This is manageable. I bought a Helmer. I could fit it all in the one Helmer. I had seen so many people who had so much more than me, so this is nothing. It sort of became a bit of a joke. People, like when I was talking to people at beauty supply when I was buying nail polish, they're like, oh, isn't it beautiful? I really shouldn't buy it. I have so much nail polish. And I'd look at them and laugh and say, I have 500 bottles. And they're like, really? I have that, like, so much like that as well. And I would say, no, literally, I have 500, 600 bottles of nail polish. I have more nail polish than the salon. And it just sort of became like this joke, this sort of way to shock people, how into the nail world I was. And I was pretty lucky. You know, I was at that job for 2 years. I really loved what I was doing, even though it wasn't the greatest environment. And there were budget cuts, and my job was the one on the chopping block. So I went from having full-time employment to no employment. In the middle of the winter, they laid me off 3 weeks before Christmas. And in my particular field, I know a lot of other fields, hiring comes in waves. There's usually a wave in the springtime, another one in the fall time, and very little in between. So I was looking at 6 months of not being able to work, and I was very lucky. I was actually sniped from my first job there to another organization who had a similar background as the first museum I was working at, and so they offered me a job almost right away. I had there's no gaps in my resume. You know, I finished in December at one job and then I started in January at the next one, but it was only part-time. And I kept looking. I figured, hey, you know what, I've been working since I was 16. I'm going to enjoy this as a bit of a break. You know, it's just a couple days a week. I'm still making, you know, really good money. I'm making more than I was at my other job, working less hours. And, you know, I sort of didn't take it too seriously. So my nail polish consumption actually dropped because I was really happy. But then the hours at that job were cut. The project I was hired for was wrapping up, so they were sort of lowering the amount of hours I was working, so I was working less hours. I wasn't enjoying the job the same way. And even though the company I was working for, and still working for, are so fantastic, the people I'm working with are amazing, and they really do make a sometimes monotonous job worth working for. I was still sort of becoming miserable, and then I had more things in my home life, my background, that were imploding all around me, and my anxiety started getting really bad again. I was diagnosed with anxiety for the first time at 19, and depression at the same time, and I'd been on treatment, on and off medications all that time, but none of the diagnosis I was given ever really felt right. So it got to a point where I was just completely out of control. I was incapable of really doing the basic things that you need to do as an adult. You know, I'd let my laundry pile up for weeks. When my medications ran out, I would just say, well, they don't help anyway, so I'm not going to bother. And I finally reached a point where my mother really just kicked me in the butt and said, this is not just depression. You have to go to the doctor. So I went to my family doctor, got a referral for a psychiatrist, and then I had to wait 5 months to actually see that psychiatrist. And when I did, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I should say primarily obsessional obsessive compulsive disorder, which is why it took so long for me to get a diagnosis, because a lot of people who have my form of OCD, we don't have like the tics, the counting, the rituals, or at least the external rituals that classic OCD does. So it often just gets misdiagnosed as anxiety disorder. And the medication for anxiety disorder is not adequate for treating OCD. You need much higher doses and stronger medications. So I kept buying nail polish. It's been about 2 years since I hit that point, and I just kept buying nail polish. I had to have it. It made me feel better. My nails had to be perfect. If they weren't perfect, I wouldn't photograph them and put them on Instagram. If there was a tiny flaw, I wouldn't be able to go to bed that night until I had redone all my nails until they were perfect. and nail polish became a point of stress for me. So fortunately, since I was diagnosed and did receive the proper diagnosis, with a lot of help from my family and my therapist and my doctors, I'm in a much better place than I was, a year and a half ago. And I've come to view my nail polish differently than what it was. Before, it was something that made me happy, something that I could control. And now it's something that I feel out of control about, and it doesn't make me happy. I'm so overwhelmed by the amount of nail polish I have that I find myself just using the same couple of bottles over and over again. And I don't want to do that because I really do love having nail polish. I love painting my nails. I love, the compliments I get when I do some really fun nail art, which I haven't really been into the past couple of years, just because that's not where my head's been. But I'm reaching that point where I want to get back to that. I want nail polish to be something I love, that makes me happy, to be a hobby again. And to do that, it means getting rid of a lot of nail polish. I have 800 bottles of conventional polish and over 100 bottles of gel polish. I feel a little sick saying that, even though I know a lot of people have, collections numbering in the thousands. That's not something I want or need. And I will feel much better going back to where nail polish made me happy, and that was when my collection numbered in, 200. I'm willing to go to 300, but ideally I'd like to keep this to about 200 bottles of nail polish. So that's a lot of polish to go through in one go. So what I'm going to do is go and tackle this drawer by drawer. I have my nail polish stashed in 2 Helmers. I'm going to insert some footage here so you can see the amount of polish I have. I'll lay it out and just to get an idea, but you really can't get an idea of the scale unless you see it in real life. And I'm going to have some criteria. I'm going to go through and pick my absolute favorites from each drawer. What would I repurchase if all of my nail polish, disappeared? What would I immediately need to replace? What are polishes that make me happy? What do I have a really good fond memory of? What are ones that I know I will use and love? And those are the ones that are going to stay. I'm going to be getting rid of some ones that I know might surprise some people. They were really coveted limited editions from, really popular collections. And, I'm going to be getting rid of everything from drugstore to indie polishes. So if you like declutter videos as much as I do, I love declutter videos, go ahead and subscribe, and so that you can be informed when I am going to be posting new videos. So we're going to start with the red drawer, so stay tuned for that and watch me agonize over getting rid of my favorite nail polishes. So thanks for listening to my ramble, and see you next time. Bye!